Okay. So we were under the section on giving, relinquishing, spending, and supporting. We talked about zakat there in general and spousal support and zakatul fitr because of all the giving involved there. That's giving something without getting anything back for it. Those are obligatory expenditures also. That's zakat and that's spousal support. And when we talked about zakatul fitr, we talked about support of other than the wife, the children, the Muslim parents, and other details. Then we moved on to talk about rewards and prizes because it's close to that with the meaning of giving. Now, still talking about giving, we want to talk about safekeeping, and we'll move on from there. So the author says safekeeping, which means leaving a deposit. If one wanted his item back, he may have deposited it with the taker to keep it safe, or loaned it to him for him to use it for free. So he may have deposited it with the taker. Only, yani, for what goal? For the taker to keep it safe, not to use it. So he says to him, take this piece for me and put it up. That means stash it away properly. Or he may have loaned it to him for use, for free. Because if it wasn't for free, what would it be? Who could tell us? If it wasn't for free, Yani, I said here. Or he could have loaned it to him for him to use it for free. So if it wasn't for free, what would that be? What type of deal would that be? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That would be a rental because he wants it back. Would be a rental. He wants it back. So if one wanted his item back, now if he took a price for that item that he wants back, it's going to be a rental. But if there's nothing like that involved here, he may have just deposited it with the taker, left it with him to keep it safe. Or he may have loaned it to the taker for him to use it for free. We're going to call that a borrowed item. Although right here we use the word loan. Again, this is an issue that has to do with the language barrier. Loaning versus borrowed items. So we'll see when we come to it, inshallah ta'ala. Now, if the owner only wanted him to keep it safe, then it's sunnah for the taker to accept. Yani, the one who's being asked to do this favor. It's sunnah for him to accept. If he trusts himself and he's able. If he trusts himself means he knows that he's not going to consume this person's money unrightfully. And he's able, yani, he has the facilities. He has the security needed. He doesn't have, for example, crazy house. So many people in his house, in and out, it's crazy, can't keep track of what's going on. And stuff is not secure there. Then he'd say, you can't leave it at my place, bro. My place is not secure. Why is it sunnah for him to accept? Because of the hadith, إن الله في عون العبد ما دام العبد في عون أخيه. Indeed, Allah helps the slave as long as the slave helps his brother. That's an important sunnah. Make the intention of helping others. Allah will help you. When you do something for someone else, have the intention of help in there so that you can get the blessing of this deed. In some cases, it is an obligation to accept. Like if someone is unable to protect what he owns except by putting it with another who is trustworthy. So if this is case, then could be obligatory on the person. I don't have any details here if you want to follow up. I don't have any details here. Could I be more exact when it's going to be obligatory on the person to accept this safekeeping task or favor? I have no details here. But in some cases, this all I have is, in some cases, it is an obligation to accept. Like if someone is unable to protect what he owns except by putting it with another who is trustworthy. But the thing is here, it's not difficult. See those words that were just given to you. So assuming that this is accurate documentation, then when these words apply to your situation, then you're going to take the judgment. What are these words here? Like if someone is unable to protect what he owns, except by putting it with another who is trustworthy. So you might find that these words apply to your situation. So then, go by the rule. You might say, I don't know though. Well, Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, I ask Allah to increase our comprehension. But I'm going to continue here. Then, in the case when it's obligatory on the person, one is entitled to request a commensurate salary. That means he's saying, okay, now I can't turn you down, but you're going to have to pay me for this because I have to take it. And he can request a commensurate salary. That means whatever that job is worth. What are you going to consider? You're going to consider the storage, the time. It is forbidden to accept when one knows betrayal about himself. Yani when one knows that he is treacherous. When one knows that he is a betrayer. He knows that about himself. He's a believer who knows about himself that if someone leaves their money with him, he will consume their money. Then it's not permissible for him to accept this task. Therefore, such a person must not take what he finds. Yani, that's another issue. The case of the one who finds a lost and found item. That's all the way in the beginning of the book. Finding. Okay, very last thing I said was, it is forbidden to accept when one knows betrayal about himself. Yeah, Yani, a person knows about himself that he is a betrayer. He's treacherous. He goes back on his word. He breaks his promise. Yani, it can be said he has a degree of hypocrisy in himself. Actually, but not hypocrisy that takes him to the level of kufr. So if he knows this about himself, he's not allowed to accept this, doing this favor for the other person. And therefore, such a person must not take what he finds. That's another issue. Lost and found items. This same person who's not allowed to accept to do this task because he knows that he's treacherous. He also is not allowed to take something if he finds it on the ground, for example. We talked about lost and found items all the way in the beginning of the book. That's why it says, as already stated. Okay, so that's the issue of safekeeping. So if you have any question about that, that's it. Yani, if you accept, then you're obligated to store this item appropriately. Each thing has its own measures of security. Depending on what it is, could be enough for you just to park it on the sidewalk. Or you might need to put it in a garage or behind a gate. Or it might be enough for you to put it in your house and lock the door. That's it. Or you might need to put it in the closet. Or you might need to put it in a safe. Now, what if this item gets damaged? We'll come to talk about reimbursement, inshallah, at the end of the booklet. But moving on now to talk about borrowed items. If the owner wanted to let the other person use it, then either it gets consumed by usage or not. Either this money is a consumable or not. Now, if it does get consumed by usage, if it is a consumable, then this is invalid. Invalid to loan an object, a consumable object, wanting it back as you gave it. That's invalid. Loaning a consumable object, wanting it back as you gave it. That's invalid. That's why you can't rent a consumable. Like when renting, how can he return it as it was if any of it were consumed? You can't rent out a candle. You can't rent out a loaf of bread. You can't rent it. So just like you can't rent something like that out, then you can't loan it out. But this is where some things might get confusing. Because someone might say, so you telling me I can't loan a person a candle? I can't loan a person a pen? I can't loan a person a piece of bread? Well, it's not the words here that's the most important thing. It's the type of deal. And then we need to see if we want to use, or what words we might want to use for the deal. So just to back you up, there's a type of deal in which you own an object and you temporarily sell its benefit. You sell the right of it to someone temporarily. That's called renting. So in this deal, you want the object back the way you gave it. You don't want it back depleted, deficient, destroyed. You want it back the way you gave it. That's a rental. This type of deal, you cannot do it with something consumable. So that one that we supposed would ask, you telling me I can't I can't loan a candle? I can't loan an ink pen? Okay, if this is difficult for you to understand what we're trying to say, then let's take it back to something that's clearer for you. A rental. Can you rent out a candle? So if he doesn't understand how dealings are supposed to go, he might think, yeah, why not? The answer is you cannot, because it's not going to come back to you the way you gave it. Or else you're going to rent it to him and tell him he can't use it. Then what's the point of renting it to him if he can't use it? So it's not valid. So you can't rent him a candle because he's going to consume it or some of it. And then he's not going to be able to give it back to you the way you gave it to him. Okay, that's clear. Now let's take the payment out but keep the rest of the deal. So minus the payment, then the deal is I'm going to let you hold it to use it and you're going to give it back to me the way I gave it to you. So still, without payment, also, if the item is a consumable one, you cannot do this type of deal. Now the question is, what do you call this kind of deal? In Arabic, it's called ariya, which I'm going to call borrowing items. But in English, you might say borrow, loan, lend. And yani, you would say those same words about something else too, another type of deal. So it's important here, more important than the name is understanding the deal. The deal is I let you hold it and I'll even let you use it. You give it back to me the way I gave it back to you. And part of the deal could be give it back to me when I say so. Like at the time that I specified for you. You can hold it this long and then give it back to me after that without keeping it. Free of charge and you can use it. That's valid as long as this is not a consumable. So if the item gets consumed by usage, then this is invalid. So what did I not say? I did not say there's no way to allow a person to use something of yours that's consumable. What I am saying is there's a type of deal that you cannot do it with something consumable, which is the one that I described for you. So if it's not consumable, then that is lending. Yani lending an item or borrowing an item. Whatever word you use, if you're talking about this type of deal, I suggest you maybe put the word item in there. If you need to. And one may appoint someone to retrieve it for him. Who's this one doing the appointing? He's the receiver, not the owner. So he basically said to someone, can I hold your such and such? Can I use your such and such and I'll give it back to you? So the owner says, yes, I accept. So then the asker, for example, says to him, okay, I'm going to send Fulan over to go get it and bring it to me. So that's the meaning of, he may appoint someone to retrieve it for him. And then the owner could say, okay, that's fine. Or the owner might say, no, you come and get it. I don't accept. The lender of a horse must feed it. Yani, he's the owner. And the borrower must return it. But that's not to say that the borrower cannot offer to feed it. He might say, let me hold your horse, I'll feed it. I'll take care of it. I'll get it back to you. Don't worry about the food. And the item's benefit must be permissible. Like renting. Yani, just like in renting. Like, can you rent a guitar? You cannot rent a guitar. It's invalid. Or a piano, it's invalid because its benefit is not permissible. So likewise, this thing that you're letting someone hold and use to give it back to you as you gave it to him, its use has to be a permissible use in the first place. If it is not immediately beneficial, it is a condition that the lender does not limit the deal to a time before the item becomes beneficial. Not immediately beneficial, like, for example, donkey, baby donkey. What's he going to do with it? There's nothing he can do with it. Because he can't eat it, and he can't use it to carry loads. It's useless. But it becomes useful later. So anytime you have something that's useless, you can't loan it out, basically. You cannot loan out something useless. Unless it will become useful. And then, if you do loan it out, it has to be for a time that it becomes useful. So we're basically saying, if it has a haram usage, you can't loan it out. And if it is useless altogether, then you can't loan it out. Except if it becomes useful later. If it becomes useful later, then you can loan it for a time that includes it becoming useful. Now, if the benefit that's sought from this item is itself an object, yani, you're borrowing something from someone, this thing you're borrowing, it actually produces objects. Like a cow produces milk, a tree produces fruit. So you want to borrow something that produces objects. If the sought benefit from this item is an object itself, so it's not just using it only that's the benefit. Using it only is like a horse that you can ride, so you're just using it only. You're not taking any objects away from it. Like the milk of the cow and the fruit of the tree. Then, how does this go? Can it go at all? The way for this to be valid is for the lender to lend the cow and permit the person to consume the milk. He says, you can borrow the cow, and any milk you get out of it, I allow you to drink it or consume it. This is valid by consensus. So that means there's two deals involved here. The lending itself, lending the object of the cow, and this what this cow produces belongs to the original owner, doesn't belong to the one who's holding the cow. So the second deal is for the original owner to permit the holder to consume the milk. So this is valid by consensus for him to loan the object, which is the cow in this scenario, and to permit the consumption of the object that's produced by this first object, which would be the milk. And it was said that one can loan the cow, and that alone grants the other person the right to benefit from what the cow produces. And it was said that this is invalid, because the actual borrowed thing would be the consumed milk. It's like those who said this is invalid is like saying he only wants the milk. Doesn't want the cow, he wants the milk. And you can't loan out a consumable, so it's not valid. So the way to make this valid by consensus and escape any difference in opinion is to loan him the cow and permit him consuming what the cow produces. Or loan him the tree or the plant and permit for him to consume what the tree produces. If a time limit is not specified, the borrower may normally use the item once. If a time limit was not specified, the borrower may normally use the item once. So that's clear. That means if it were a book, for example, you read the book one time from beginning to end, then you give it back and that's it. Unless he is permitted to use it repeatedly. Then with that permission, he can use it repeatedly and then return it. And if the time is specified, then one may use the item repeatedly until the expiration. Wallahu a'lam. Let's stop there. Next section is loaning and owing. We want to talk about monetary loans. So there's three things here to differentiate between. One of them is allowing something to consume something of yours that's consumable. Another thing is loaning a non-consumable item to a person so that he would return it to you as you gave it to him. And a third thing is a monetary loan, which means that the person is going to consume what you gave him and return something like it or its value. Either he'll replace it or he'll give you its value. That's what we're going to talk about, inshallah, next week if Allah enables us. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
The person who borrowed something for someone, they gave him a time limit to borrow, got a time limit of X, Y, Z, and he went over that time limit by using the person's belongings. What should one do then?
Then it's obligatory on that borrower to return it. He's sinful here. So, for example, one could go to the judge, or if he doesn't have to go that far, he could just go to the person and say, hey, your time's up. Give it back to me.
Okay,
If he,
there's no recovery.
huh?
So there's no punishment for that?
No, not necessarily. Here, you could just, if the person is denying the item, then he'll have to take him to the judge. And then he'll explain the case to the judge, and then the judge will rule according to the rules. You're welcome. Which, by the way, for your information, when I say the judge will rule according to the rules, could be according to the rules, the judge will say this belongs to the one who's denying. It doesn't really belong to him. Could be the judge will rule for him, say it belongs to him if he knows how to argue, if he knows the religious rules and then he lies basically. If he knows religious rules and then he lies in a way that enables him to take the item, that's something that could happen. He says, so when you mention using an item without a return time being specified, then that item is used normally. According to using it normally, can that be excluded? According to using it normally, can that be excluded? I'm sorry, it's not clear for me. You said, when you mention using an item without a return time being specified, then that item is used normally. Yes, like if it's a book, he'll read it and then give it back to him. That's how you normally use a book. So he'll read it and give it back to him. So he said, according to using it normally, can that be excluded? So that part's not clear for me. He said, instead of using it once, can the item be used repetitively? No, not without permission. You're welcome.